Hello, hello, hello. We are live in the tropics today. You see that I'm not alone today. I'm with Cate Hogan, who's also in Bali, actually just a couple doors away from my villa. So we're literally on the same street, two different webcams, two different houses. All right, before we get officially started, first of all, thank you everyone for coming here today to join us live. If you are here on Crowdcast saying hello to us, please come onto the chat box, introduce yourself. We see 3V from Orlando, which is here. Bettina, who is the community ambassador in Crowdcast today. She's going to be welcoming everyone on this chat show that we're about to have. But if you are watching us from our other channels, very likely on Facebook, our Facebook page, or our YouTube channel, you are probably seeing a live stream of what's going on right now. But the real conversation is actually happening on Crowdcast itself, and we have planted a link there for you to join us here so that Cate and I can answer questions about your career transition, any questions you have about Cate's story after we're finished. Here is where we're doing it, and it's a lot more fun on this side of the party here as well. Yolanda from Toronto, a fellow Canadian as well, is here. What? We are always trying to really make sure that we try to include as many time zones as we can. But usually we have people coming here from like 3 different continents, which is super hard, especially with the guests and things like that. So Cate is in Bali right now, which makes it a lot easier for me to be awake at the same time she's at. But we are also going to be sending a replay. So if any of you are jumping in late or needing to cook dinner for the kiddies or whatever has to happen in your day, don't worry. We will send this as a replay. So that you can catch everything when you have to jump off as well. Hi, Brandon from Hong Kong. Brandon joins us quite often as well, which is great. All right, so before we get officially started with this really, really inspirational interview with my good friend Cate, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. The first thing is, as I said, jump on here from our other pages and join the conversation on Crowdcast. And also, if you are on Crowdcast right now, if you can help us share this interview, that would be lovely to other people in your channels that might need a bit of an inspirational dose up the butt a little bit to get their kickstart of making sure that they too aren't giving up on their dreams and trying to find out how other people have done their own transition plans. Please share this interview today by going to the top right-hand corner of the screen, clicking on the invite button and sharing on the channels there. That would really help us spread some good stories and good mojo all around. Hi, Lee from Texas. Great. We've got lots of people from different areas around the world, which is awesome. Anyone from Australia, where Cate is actually from, that would be great as well to give her some Aussie love. Inspiration up the butt. Yep, Lee, that is exactly what I said. Okay, so we are also asking a poll question today. So if you sort of hover underneath the video, you will see a poll, and there's a question there, which is, what holds you back from pursuing the work you want to do that's beyond your resume? So there's a couple options there. We want to hear from you. What is your struggle when it comes to doing something that you've never been paid to do before, but maybe quite passionate about, or you may be quite afraid to actually be showing that side of you that you know you could be good at, but maybe haven't been validated in the past. So please help us answer that poll question. Now, in this interview with Cate, you're going to get lots of questions coming up, I'm sure, that you'll want to ask her. So how we keep organized for the Q&A session is to use the Ask a Question tab. So again, underneath this video, you will see a Ask a Question menu item. Click on it and you'll be able to post your question ahead of time, especially if you need to jump off at some point. And we will make sure to timestamp when Cate answers that question or myself answers that question for you. And you can go straight into that timestamp section of this interview and get to your burning question answer that we'll do for you at the end of the Q&A. Now, you can, of course, be conversing with each other on the chat box, which is great. Say hello to each other. And Bettina will also be helping you to transfer some of your questions from your chat box into our Ask a Question tab. Okay, I think that is all it is for housekeeping so that we can get officially started. So first of all, thank you everyone for coming on your busy day or your busy night to join us. This week's Tribe Talk, well, first of all, let me tell you what a Tribe Talk is. So we run Tribe Talks about once a month where we share real stories and strategies from other escapees who have successfully reinvented their lives to help inspire you to take your leap to do something different with your life. So this Tribe Talk is a special interview series dedicated to the Academy of Cubicle Crashers, which is my flagship 12-month online program program and community designed to kickstart your freedom, career, and life. So we help you in 12 months with practical, effective career reinvention strategies and life transition guidance to start creating a better version of your work and your lifestyle. And so the powerful work that we do with the collective intelligence of all our members in an intimate community has really helped people just like you to figure out what business to start, how to create a strategy to launch a side hustle, and really learn how to be confident being your own boss and having more autonomy over the way that you make a living. So today is a bit of a taster, a bit of a sneak peek of the types of conversations we're having daily at the Academy. So if you are interested to learn about the Academy, we run it about 2 times a year, maybe 3 times this year. You can click on the green button right underneath this video to learn more about the Academy. We will be opening up doors again in July of 2018. So if you're interested to have a chat with me about whether or not the Academy is a good fit for where you're at right now, just click on that button, know more about the Academy, and book a time to chat with me. Now, if you're here for the first time and meeting me for the first time, I'm Lydia Lee. I'm the corporate escape coach and small business strategist at Screw the Cubicle. I've helped hundreds of talented professionals just like you to reinvent their careers, but also repurpose their talents to create a business that they can love. And just like Cate, I'm also based in Bali, and I spent my time teaching people how to quit the jobs that's really crushing their souls, discover their hidden talents, and make money doing something they love and will care about. So today, I'm not alone in telling stories of escape artistry. I'm joined by Cate Hogan, who you see on my right or left side, depending on how you see this crowdcast. She's really a great friend of mine that I've known for, how long has it been, Cate, that we've known each other? 5.5 years, maybe?
About that, yeah.
Okay, almost five years. And I remember interviewing you on a podcast very long ago, but a lot of people have not seen that podcast or heard that podcast, which I'm so glad to sort of be reintroducing your story again. And Cate really has this incredible story of losing everything before she even got here, sort of thing. We'll talk more about that story, and really restarting her life from ground zero again, right? After she's had a bit of a financial loss that was something she was relying on for that kickstart of her new life. So Cate and I are going to be talking a lot about her experience of trusting in sort of bigger and better things that really pushed her from this high position career in marketing in Sydney to pursuing a passion of being a fiction writer and editor in Bali, which is completely something you've never been paid to do before. And we're going to dive into sort of what you had to do to get confident about that. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about today is really how that, being on the verge of being laid off, being in a verge of a breakdown in a really cutthroat industry like the film industry in Sydney really allowed Cate to do something different with her life. And what Cate really learned about starting a business for the first time in an industry she's never been educated or paid to do before, and has now found a passion in doing, which is helping writers become best-selling authors. So if you guys are listening on the chat box, tell us if you are someone like Cate who is sort of in the verge of trying something new. Maybe it's not this career or this business idea you're thinking about, you've never actually been able to do before, or it's part of your resume. Let us know what you're most fearful about, and I can make sure to maybe ask Cate some questions about some strategies in terms of mindset or fear-mongering tactic, wrangling the fear-mongering monster that she's had to do as well in order to help you sort of pursue something that doesn't seem as familiar, but is something you're interested in. Well, let's get started with your story, Cate. Tell us a bit about sort of how you thought about coming to Bali to do this thing. Why Bali? What made you want to leave this sort of sexy career in the movies and film industry? And because you've worked a long way to get up that corporate ladder, what made you want to give it up and sort of start this completely unknown path that seems super risky to pursue?
Well, hi everyone. It was less of a decision and more of a sense of desperation, I think. And it's really interesting how so many people sometimes feel that they have to hit rock bottom before there's enough pain there for them to actually make the choice to change. And I believe that that's what happened to me. I did work really, really hard to get to my little, harborside office in Sydney, and in the film industry, in the Australian film industry, which is probably one of the toughest industries in the world to kind of work in, and one of the most underfunded industries. And ultimately, I was just looking at the mentors above me who I had so much respect for and who I was kind of like modeling my life around. And I just realized that the price that they paid to be where they were was a much bigger price than I was willing to pay. And so when the company that I was working for became insolvent, we actually put on big film events as well as being distributors and other things. The decision was almost made for me because the company effectively went bankrupt. One of our events ended up costing, going millions of dollars over budget, and it kind of like destroyed the whole company, sadly. And so I actually went to Bali for a holiday. I'd love to say that I went there to make this big life change. I actually went there to recover on the beach.
Right.
And then after I'd been there for 3 weeks, I realized that I just couldn't go back. Like there was no way. So once I was there, that's when a number of other things happened that meant that, as I've discussed with you in the past, I lost all of my life savings through some bad investments that I was kind of like hoping to live off the proceeds of these investments. Right. And instead, like the financial crash meant that, this was kind of post GFC, but those stocks effectively went down to, or financial products went down to a value of zero. And my partner and I were left with nothing. So in a sense, it was kind of like, look, we can go back to Sydney, get straight back into the corporate world, strike while the iron's hot. I had job offers coming through. And in the end, I just thought, I'm just going to go back to doing what I was doing. And because it is in the arts and because it is very competitive, I've put a huge amount of value on this job because I know that there are 1,000 other people wanting to be sitting where I'm sitting. But is that a good reason to commit the next 30 years of my life to something that is really, really exhausting and ultimately not as creatively fulfilling as what I could be doing, which is what I'm now doing.
Right. So when you initially came to Bali, it was almost like a sabbatical, right? A little bit of a break from the breakdown and the chaos that is of the film industry. So you didn't, at that time, did you know you wanted to be a fiction romance editor and writer, or was it something that sort of came to you after you went through that financial crisis?
Reading has always been a reprieve for me, and in a very stressful time, I already read probably 3 or 4 hours a day just for fun. And so if I'm like, where I was in a kind of like a quarter life or a midlife crisis, I kind of retreated into my books. It never occurred to me that I could make a full-time living from that, let alone a living that paid me better than the money that I made in Sydney. So I think if someone had come to me with that idea, I would have been completely overwhelmed by it, thinking that it was impossible and too good to be true. And ultimately, what happened was I just, out of sheer desperation, kind of went online and offered to pretty much read people's books for free, just as something to do, even if it was earning me as little as $5. And from there, from putting my passion out into the world and connecting with other people, even with a very limited expectation of where that would take me or how it would support me, just through that one action, I then started this whole journey of actually creating a full-time career and a business.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is sort of an incredible shift of thought, because when you think about going through a financial crisis, because, I've gone through a very small scale of something like that when I first started a business, which is really scary when you've sort of put a lot on the line financially. And, it's a big risk to start a business to begin with, or quit your job to begin with. And then when you have your life savings taken away from you, this sort of comfort zone of some pot of money that you can rely on. I mean, the last thing sometimes that would occur to someone is going, well, what am I passionate about? And what should I do to make a living? When you're stuck in this sort of fear-based stage of going, how am I going to just feed myself for the next month or two? What sort of walk me through a little bit of that moment, because I can imagine myself being in that stage and sort of being in pure panic and anxiety without the space to be creative, right? Of thinking about what I want to do with my life, when all I'm thinking about is how am I going to shelter myself and how am I going to deal with this crisis? What had to happen in your thought process? And was it the same? I mean, did you have a discussion with your partner to ensure that this is sort of the right way to do it? How did you manage to get out of that sort of darkness of losing everything and then being able to sort of get into a headspace of going, all right, it's go time. How am I going to feed myself and make a living alternatively to what I was used to doing?
Well, I think that one of the secrets to it was that I didn't actually put too much pressure on myself. Like, I feel that a lot of people possibly find themselves in a situation where they're like, I'm quitting my job and then I'm launching this business. And the weight of that on your shoulders, especially if, I mean, my partner and I have a mortgage, we do have financial commitments. So it's not like we were complete, like free spirits, able to do what we wanted. But at the same time, in my own mind, I was thinking, I just want to give myself permission to explore this in a very light, fun, and creative way. And if it is a disaster, I'll just go back to Sydney and get a corporate job. Like that was my kind of end point. I think it would be really nice to kind of be like, look, it's this or nothing. I'm an artist now. I'm committed to this path. But as much as I'm a big believer in commitment and committing to your goals, at the same time, I think that you can put so much kind of like expectation and weight on your shoulders that in that kind of desperation or that fog, it stops being fun and it starts being really scary. So I did treat it as, I think the big moment for me was when I sat down and created my first website. And that was like, wow, this is real. I'm putting my services out. They have prices. You know, I have clients. There are people with expectations of me. But I do feel that the whole thing grew quite organically over the space of about 12 months. And I use third-party freelancing sites to really build that for anyone here who might be in the creative arts or in that kind of is, you know, exploring the gig economy. That was, if I, as an ex-marketing manager, I know how hard it is to kind of like create marketing campaigns that are going to drive fresh leads to your website. You need to have money and you need to put quite a lot of work in to generate that. By just dabbling in these websites, I was able to experiment and see what I felt like doing and what my services looked like and what kind of prices I could charge in a very kind of like fun, experimental way, without kind of having to invent the perfect product overnight or invent the perfect service overnight, which I think I would have felt quite stressful and possibly would have suffered more from imposter syndrome if I had tried to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, when you're trying anything new for the first time, you almost start a bit like an intern, right, in your own career where you're not saying, hey, I'm going to be CEO right away. And I need to actually be establishing a brand and, you know, what we think we have to do in order to get familiar with the artistry or the creative expression that we're wanting to experiment with. And I love that idea of experimentation. I mean, a lot of the work that I do with the tribe over at Screw the Cubicle is about testing out the abilities, right? Not just on like, can I do the work that I'm wanting to charge for, but on a personal level, do I even like the work? Because very likely you could have said, hey, you know what? I've been reading for pleasure. And once I start turning that passion into something that I monetize, could it taint my interest at this point? Because a lot of people do have that question. You know, it's like, what if I turn my passion into a business and actually end up hating it and then end up tainting the feeling and the pleasure that I associate with that passion? I mean, a lot of people feel that way. So I like the idea that you sort of gave yourself this sort of, I don't know how long it was of a time period, but you gave yourself this sort of buffer room to go, you know what, let's just try and see how I feel about this entire thing. So experimenting and testing it out was a big deal for you. Now, even if it was an experiment, I'm sure there was a moment of potentially feeling like, you know, when you first even tested your first $5 gig, you know, to read 1,000 words or whatever it was that you charged for. There must have been a moment of like, oh my God, can I actually give feedback? Do I know how to give feedback? Did you have to sort of study other editors of how they've done it in the past to do so? Like, how did you sort of get started in making sure that you didn't feel like an imposter, no matter what you were charging, free or not, and being able to sort of deliver some sort of valuable feedback to the first client that you sort of recruited?
Well, put it this way. If I'd gone into editing and charged my first client what I'm charging today, I would have been a complete imposter and someone should have locked me up. Thankfully, at the beginning, as you said, I was charging so little for my services. I was effectively doing stuff for free, really. It was probably not enough to pay for the air conditioning and the coffee at my desk, which I have to say, like, required quite a lot of, it was very humbling because I was a respected marketing manager in my previous job. I did have this, you know, life in the film industry that had taken me quite a long time. I did have staff working under me. So suddenly asking for $5 for someone
a bit of an ego hit.
It totally was, but it's also exactly what I needed. And it just gave me that space to experiment without feeling like I was cheating anyone. And honestly, it quickly became apparent to me that I was on the right path, because I got such amazing feedback from people. Like literally people would say, you know, I've tried so many different beta readers. I've spoken to so many different editors. This is the first time that someone's like put so much energy into understanding my story. And to be fair, I have actually done a degree in film and television, which does go quite deeply into storytelling. So I did have some basis of education. And honestly, reading for 4 or 5 hours a day has also provided me with, yeah, exactly, kind of through osmosis. I've kind of, you know, definitely absorbed a lot of the principles of storytelling, as most people have. So that gave me the confidence to start increasing my prices and start really thinking about what I was doing. And then on the other side, I was also writing my own projects and hiring a very good editor for my work, and seeing what she did with her clients, what the expectation was. And without sounding overly arrogant, I knew that I was within the same ballpark. I hadn't done a degree in literature like she had. She'd done a degree at Oxford. I hadn't done a degree at Oxford or anything like that. But at the same time, that's the beautiful thing about pursuing something that you're really passionate about. Generally, you're really passionate about it because you do have some kind of natural connection to that thing, whatever it is. And when you do have that natural connection, you tend to be really good at it. Yeah. And in some ways, I think that I'm probably better at it, having taken this roundabout path and finally found my way to editing, 6 years ago now, than maybe someone who straight out of high school was like, oh, I want to edit books for a living, and went and did a degree and is now stuck in a job at Penguin that they hate, you know, correcting copy. Like, I've that following of the muse, of the passion, of the flow, will ultimately lead you to crafting an experience or a service that is really good, because we all have it within ourselves. We just have to find what it is and then give ourselves the fertile ground to kind of explore it, which is what happened to me in Bali. I'm very, very fortunate that it did.
And I mean, at the end of the day, deep interest counts for something, doesn't it? Because we do rely, right? We rely so much on credentials, certifications, degrees, and like you said, someone from Oxford and having a degree in literature looks good on paper, and that works well in the traditional working sense. Like if you wanted to get a job at Penguin House, for example, you would need some of these credentials to, in a way, compete, right, with other people who want that job. Now, all of a sudden, when it comes to entrepreneurship, the rules do change. They're different. You get to make them up. You get to decide whether or not you're good enough to do the thing you want to do, and how, and the confidence that you bring to the table and how you speak to your clients. That's what people are going to believe, rather than, you know, only being validated by a third party audience, right? Like you have to believe in yourself. Now, for yourself, I mean, as you said, you didn't have the credentials, you didn't have the edge. I mean, you had some storytelling education, but I even love the fact that you understood or aware enough that filmmaking, had to do with stories. And some people don't put two and two together. We make it very literal. It's like, I only have filmmaking experience and then I have to be stuck here. So I love that you sort of looked at it on a bigger picture to go, hey, you know what? These aspects of filmmaking actually links to this new body of work that I'm willing to pursue that actually is quite helpful, which people don't think about. We're very literal about our resume. You know, it's like, this is exactly the same industry that I have to stick in, and I can't repurpose some of my talents into a new one, you know? So, so you sort of knew that storytelling would be very helpful for you in the experience that you've had. Well, first of all, did anyone ever ask you for your credentials? Because that's also the fear that a lot of people have, is that when I start telling people about what I want to be doing, and it may not be something I've been paid to do before, how do I stay credible? You know, how do I tell people that I am the right person that can help you with this, even if I'm starting out for the first time? So what did you sort of had to rely on yourself for that was beyond credentials, education, and a degree in writing? And how could you know for sure that you could do the work well? when you accepted a customer?
Yeah, I think it started off being so cheap that they had no need to ask for my credentials. And then from that point, I had so many clients, I had too many clients to deal with. So that's when I started increasing my prices. I was out of the experimental phase and into the product development and service phase. And so I increased my prices. And by that point, people were working with me because they saw all of the rave reviews that I had from other clients. So it was all testimonial based. And to a large degree, it still is. Now my prices are at another level again. And mainly what I'm banking on now is the fact that I have developed the books of many best-selling writers. And so their success, I can kind of borrow from their success a little bit. So I have like the best-selling books on my website. I have incredible client testimonials for people, and that seems to be enough. You know, the funny thing is that often when you actually work with an editor in an agency or even in a traditional publishing house, you don't get to pick your editor. It's they're kind of assigned to you. And so I know a lot of people who, I actually don't know a lot of people, but you do hear stories, and certainly I've experienced this myself in looking for an editor for my own work, where you're kind of like, you get stuck with someone who has great credentials, but then the work that they do is, in my opinion, not fantastic. And often you can kind of sense that they're also in a job that they don't love. So in a way, I think that client testimonials are one of the best ways. And I also have a referral process in place. Anyone who refers a client to me gets a discount off their next editing job. And I think that finding new people that way is really wonderful, because having someone tell you, wow, this person really transformed my book and now it's done so well, and I credit them with some of that success, that's always going to be worth way more to me than, you know, having a few letters after my name. Or something like that. So
it's so true. I mean, the social proof part is actually the credibility, because if you can prove the work, it doesn't actually matter what, you know, the credentials are, because you're doing the work, you're in the vicinity of that work, and it's being validated by another human. And I think that's why that's such an important point to bring up today, is that this experimental beta, you know, what I call the beta lab, you know, you can call it the tester stage or whatever it is. It could be a 1 month period, it could be a 3 month period. I myself did that as well before I launched Screw the Cubicle officially. I didn't know if I was going to like coaching. I didn't know if I would get completely annoyed by solving people's problems. Maybe I just like to blog about it, but I wasn't actually prepared to walk people through that transition. And you're not going to know until you really do the work, you know, and you don't have to have a website up and all that official things that you think you need to get done before actually doing the thing that you say you're going to do, whether it's for free. I mean, I took on about 8 guinea pigs to really start with, you know, 8 people that not everybody was the perfect fit, which I'm sure happened to you, right? Some people you're like, wow, I'll never work with someone like that again. But you wouldn't have known, right? You wouldn't have known what that looked like until you actually sort of did it.
Well, and the fun thing is, like, if you really love what you're doing, it's fun. It's not like, you know, your bosses ask you to stay back and do overtime over the weekend. Like, every time I've sat down at the computer and built my website, or, you know, in the past, I would design websites, not in a technical sense, but from an aesthetic and experiential sense. I would design websites for clients. That was work for me.
Right.
When I sat down to do my own in this little experiment, it was fun. It was a fun way to, you know, spend an afternoon. And that's the beauty of doing something that you really love and building a future that you own, as opposed to just working for an employer. You know, suddenly you can stay up till 2 a.m. Doing something, and then go to bed and wake up refreshed the next day, because you fed something in your soul, even if it is experiential, even if you're not making lots of money. And I mean, in the early days, I wasn't making much money at all. I think I was making about $150 a week. And sometimes I do have a lot of writers come to me saying, you know, how can you teach me what you did, and so that I can mimic it, because God knows there are a lot of starving writers out there.
Sure.
And when I tell them what I did, they're kind of appalled. And I'm like, look, if you're not willing to I worked for free for 18 months in the film industry to get my job. Like, I worked as a free intern for 18 months with my company. If you're not willing to work for free for yourself for 3 months, then I think that you've got to really question, like, whether you've just decided to focus on a job that you're really passionate about, or whether you need to possibly, you know, build up your self-belief a little bit before you launch onto this journey, because that's, I mean, for me at least, that's what it took, and it was absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I think the intent to start a business cannot always be driven by just money, because the money for most businesses will never come right away. It just doesn't work that way. And we forget as well about the many, many numbers of years we spent climbing the corporate ladder to get to a particular position that paid us well. You know, we forgot about those internships. We forgot about all the money and time we spent at university getting into ourselves in student loan debt in order to just get an entry level position. And so why should we expect that when we start a business, we go straight to CEO? I mean, that doesn't work like that. You start off as an intern in your business. And as you said in the beginning of this interview, eating that humble pie and actually being really, humble about the process and being a student really of your own work is going to be the thing that helps you to be sustainable in how you build your business, rather than have these high expectations that you have to be making thousands and thousands of dollars a month when you first get started, because that's just not realistic.
Yeah,
right?
And if you don't make that straight away, then that's a big sign from the universe that you've made a massive mistake and you're not worthwhile, and that you should give up and go back to the security of a job. I mean, that's it. It's very easy to find reasons, like very justifiable reasons to stop doing what you're doing. But if you love what you're doing and you've given yourself the space and the time to explore it, then I absolutely believe that you'll be successful in it. I think that this has been the most natural fit for me ever. And I don't have a degree in literature. But you know what's fun for me on a Sunday afternoon is to write an article about writing that goes into, all kinds of like really deep and nuanced ideas about narrative weaving and stuff that, non-writers would find totally kind of like go over the top of their head. But for me, again, like just building that credibility and building value for my clients, not because I have to, but because that is a fun way for me to spend a few hours anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're building, everything you are building and investing your time in is for you. There's the equity of time, right, that you've built for yourself. It all equals the growth of your company, which I think, when you build a business, you better do it without the intent of trying to escape work, because you're very likely going to be working more than you ever did before, especially in your first 2 years. So it's not about escaping work, but it's about creating really great work. So work doesn't feel like work. And it's actually something that you're building this asset, right, that grows with you forever, and that feels really, really fulfilling. Now, I want to quickly go into the process of what you discovered during this testing phase of 3 months, because a lot of people have sent me some questions via email when we sort of talk to people about you coming here, because a lot of people that are listening to this interview are people in that verge of creating a beta lab, creating a testing experience to go, can I do this thing? What should my packages be like? What should I be pricing my services? Who do I really want to attract? What is the sort of process, right, of onboarding a client? How do I use the beta lab process to build out, the process of how I would work with a paid client? So what did you discover that was really beneficial for you in terms of bringing that experience to then learn how to price yourself, or learn how to package what you did, or maybe even position yourself in the marketing aspect of how you sell that service? What did you learn in your beta lab?
Wow, so much. I think for starters, I started my pricing so cheap that I was pretty much employed full time after about 3 weeks, which was great in that it allowed me to actually have a lot of interactions with my clients, so that I got like a lot more feedback.
If a little small paid internship for yourself.
Exactly. I effectively gave myself an internship. And via keeping my price, so I can't say that I had a lot of insights into what my pricing should be, because realistically, I couldn't know what the pricing would be until I'd been in it for about a year and I was actually charging industry rates. I guess I did have writing mentors and editors who I was hiring myself, and I could look at their pricing and kind of treat that as a bit of a, I'm gonna try and aim for $50 an hour, trying to aim for $70 an hour, trying to aim for $100 an hour. So I had a loose kind of benchmark, but in general, it would take time for me to actually work out what my fee should be. I did learn a lot about my clients. I learned that I, for whatever reason, tend to work really well with men in their 50s to 70s.
Right. What a niche.
What a niche. these are people who have worked very hard in their own corporate lives and are ready to invest in their own creativity, and they're very committed to the process. So that was a great natural fit for me. And I learned very quickly what I enjoyed. I'm not a proofreader. I'm not a copy editor. I'm not here to polish people's text so that it reads well. I'm absolutely in love with the developmental side of fiction and memoir, which means working on crafting characters and plot lines and structure and the kind of story experience, the heart and bones of the story, as opposed to the final aesthetics. So that allowed me to then, redesign my packages around that. I learned that there is a bit of an education process for my clients, because most people, when they write a book, think, oh, I need an editor, and they go out and they get a copy editor and a proofreader. They don't realize that actually developmental editing is by far the most important part of the process.
Right.
And the biggest indicator of whether your book will be commercially viable or not. Readers are happy to ignore the odd typo, whereas a bad story or a poorly told story is, no one gets past the first 10 pages. So I have to educate all of the clients on the internet who are kind of going out looking for a proofreader and say, actually, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but you're probably going to have to write another 3 or 4 versions of your book before it's really commercially viable. So it's learning about that messaging through my content and that process. So yeah, I would say in summary, understanding who my client is, understanding what they need, and understanding what I want to give and what I find the most pleasure in giving. Those were the 3 key areas for me.
That's such an important point, because the boundaries of the work is so important for us to establish, and we wouldn't know what those boundaries could be until we actually do the work and sort of go, wow, I didn't want to do the proofreading. And I think that's what a lot of people sometimes are making mistakes doing when we first start off as entrepreneurs, is we try, especially in service-based industries, we try to offer too much, because we're trying to compensate for the confidence, right? We're trying to compensate for doing this for the first time. So we sort of go, marketing for everybody. We do anything to do with marketing. And then you end up having to be spread too thin, right? And not being able to actually package yourself or niche down, because you're trying to be everything to everyone. And then in conclusion, being nobody, because there's no specialty in it. So it sounds like it really helped you to create those personal boundaries so that A, you enjoy the work and you're not dreading the customer when you actually say yes to a sale. And then 2, it's really understanding how to speak to your customers in a language that they recognize, right? In a way that is going to hit them about what they're thinking about today, rather than what you think about as an editor, but really what's going on in their world, because they're going to tell you exactly what's happening when they hire you, even in this beta lab, which is super important for marketing. So when people have trouble with marketing their business, very likely is they haven't started talking to enough of their customers. They haven't started to work with enough of their customers. And it's sort of the cart before the horse thing, where we tend to focus on the shiny stuff, right? The website, the branding, the logo, the colors, the photography, and go, if I get that right, and then they will come. But
everything will follow.
Right. And it doesn't work that way. People need to be engaged, in a way that, you could have a 1-page site and have really shitty photographs, but if the content is what brings them in, you're speaking their language, it is so, much more of a link of alignment, that they're going to call on you, rather than just looking at some pretty words or, pretty branding on your site. Jen is saying, wow, that is me. I love the concept of developmental editing. So Jen is also a student at the Academy, by the way. And so she's been really excited to kind of hear from you as well, Cate. So I think that is such a great little summary of what you get out of a beta lab. That is a personal benefit of knowing you're going to love the work, but also on a marketing perspective, on a packaging perspective, on pricing, it helps you to position yourself, right, a bit more clearly.
Totally. And I could never have pictured what my business looked like when I first entered this process. You would have to have such a, gift for fortune telling. I mean, there are so many things that have surprised me. I thought that I really wanted to work with women writing romance, and I do love working with women writing romance, but that's not a realistic portrayal of, where the best clients for me are with the biggest budgets. And, these are the things that you have to experiment with to understand. And that has meant that I've changed some of the artwork on my website to be less feminine and more gender neutral. My survey forms are in black and white now. They used to be in pink and like pastels. Right. I could never have known all of that. I had to go through this process, and while saying that, yes, you're adaptable and you're flexible and you change depending on what the market requires. But at the same time, I'm very centered on what makes me happy and the service that I want to provide. I'm not going to, I know that I could make even more money by editing, say, the papers that Bitcoin guys are doing for their new ICOs and stuff like that. They have these huge budgets and the work's super easy, and it's, but that's not what I'm interested in. So I'm flexible, but to a point. I still come back to what I love, which is story development.
And of course, you've had this business for quite a number of years now. How has it changed since the beginning of sort of freelancing your skills to sort of multiple types of projects and finding your niche and position, which took, quite a bit of time of change and a few expansions of what that version looks like. What does today look like for you from those days of, $5 editing jobs to where you're at the moment?
I think one of the biggest changes has been increasing my prices quite dramatically, not from the perspective that I make more money so much as the fact that attracts a completely different type of clientele. So I'm only working with people who take their writing really seriously and are ready to invest money into it as a actual commercial product that they're planning on selling. And generally they already have a lot of successful books. So there's less of this kind of like, I'm a hobby writer, or, I wrote this thing and I hope it's successful, but I'm not sure. I'm just like much more in the professional end of the spectrum now, which I really enjoy. Absolutely work with new writers all the time as well, but they tend to be new writers who are really, really committed to their project. So, and see writing as a lifelong career as opposed to just something that they're doing for fun right now. So that's been probably the biggest difference. And also I just don't have to try as hard anymore. I don't have to fight as hard. Like I try very hard in the work that I do, obviously, but I have more clients coming to me than I'm able to service. So I'm always booked out about 4 months in advance. And I think that that sense of I'm just doing what I was born to do. I'm really good at it, and people really appreciate it. It probably took me about 3 to 4 years to get to that point, but that's where I'm at now, and there's no struggle in that. It's a really nice kind of circle of give and take, which works really well, and it's very rewarding on all kinds of levels.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into some of the burning questions of the Q&A, because there's some great questions there for us to answer for the audience today, I just wanted to go back a little bit into slightly what we talked about when we talked about, this beginning time of when you didn't yet know whether or not editing could be your jam, or that there's value in the work that you do besides just, reading for fun or pleasure. Now, one of the big questions that a lot of people have that they've been sending in is they have a fear about finding their first customer. Sometimes, yes, the customers are in their own network, of like, friends of friends, family, that could be your first customers. I mean, that's very likely can happen for a lot of people where are potential clients for them, and they just have to sort of be telling people this is what they do now. Now, with your niche, it's very different. It's very specialized. You're looking at romance writers, that industry, right? And not everybody in your network is obviously going to fall into that profile of a customer. Now, for people that have niches that need to go out there in the public world to find for the first time, what would be your advice about where do you position yourself? Where do you broadcast your services? Where do you go and find these first customers if they're not on your network list, on your Facebook page or things like that?
Well, firstly, I would say that I think it's really good to go outside of your own network, just because it helps you overcome that imposter syndrome. You can kind of recreate yourself in a way, which is a really fun process. So who I am as an editor is a bit of a hard ass. I give it to you straight. I'm supportive as well. and constructive in my advice, but I'm a little bit tougher. If I was working with my own friends, I think that would have been really, I wouldn't have had the self-confidence to give people such a clear kind of directive. So being able to recreate yourself a little bit in real life, I'm more of a people pleaser. Who I am online is someone who is very kind of focused and a specialist. And it's not that I'm lying by presenting myself that way. It's just that I've accessed a different part of myself, which I've then allowed to flourish. And I feel a much happier person now that I have given that part of myself, which was always there and always wanting to come out, space to do so. So being anonymous online can be a really, really good thing.
Love that idea.
I found a lot of my initial clients through third-party websites, like I mentioned earlier, freelancing sites and things like that. I've also had success by connecting with groups on Facebook that are writing-related groups. It's just an excellent way to connect with a niche and know that the people that you're talking to are really interested in your field. So that's been quite successful. I've created a lot of content for very high credibility blogs. I've written for Nink, which is a exclusive network of writers in the US, and you have to have had multiple national best-selling books to join. So I know that whenever I'm writing for Nink, I'm speaking to people who really are at the top of their game. So I've developed all of those kinds of pathways. Definitely the third-party websites were the key for me.
The starting point.
A really good starting point, just as a lead generation tool. Like, you go on a third-party website. I believe in, so there are two types of third-party websites. And this is really relevant to anyone who is offering a service of any kind. There are the websites where you have to pitch for jobs that other people have listed.
Like
Upwork, Elance. I don't believe in that. I think that you can waste a huge amount of time pitching on different jobs, and ultimately it's a race to the bottom, because often the people who accept, the job are just looking for the cheapest person with the best ratings. So it's kind of like you're constantly like lowering yourself, and you're not necessarily finding a really good value client. I've had much more, thank you, Jen. I've had much more success with sites like Fiverr. Now, whenever I say Fiverr, people have a heart attack.
People are like, ugh.
Yeah. Firstly, get over yourself. You might have to sell something for $5 at the start if you're really passionate about following this path. I still have gigs on Fiverr. They're not $5. The cheapest gig that I have on Fiverr is $100, which is effectively what I charge for a sample these days. Now, I'm using that as a lead generation tool. The difference with something like Fiverr compared to Elance is that on Fiverr, you post the service that you provide, and people come to you and buy that service. So you're not pitching, trying to get other people's work. You're like, this is who I am, this is what I do, and they come to you, and straight away you have your lead. So that is, even when I was doing $5 gigs on Fiverr, I was saying, you know what? I will effectively work for free, because as a marketing manager, I understand the money that goes into putting together campaigns to generate leads.
Right.
So like in the last job that I had, we would put a value of like a cost per acquisition value of every lead that came through our website as an inquiry cost us $50 to get. So I could see that $5 gig that I was getting on Fiverr was actually worth $50 to me in campaigns and marketing campaigns that I'd never had to do. So when you reframe it like that, suddenly it's not, I'm selling myself for $5. It's like, I am attracting a lead, and then how I convert that lead into a bigger job is up to me. But if you're really good at what you do and you're charging a fair price, then you will get rave reviews, and you will get people coming back and saying, thank you for doing this sample. How much will you charge to do the whole book? And so, I've found, and that applies to people who are on Fiverr. There are people who are consultants, astrologers, graphic designers, web builders. I mean, any service that you can package into a, product can be sold on a platform like that. And it is a great way to just dip your toes in the market and start connecting with people and start activating that first step.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost like what I did. I said I didn't do it in a third-party site, but for example, these 1 hour long discovery calls that I do, which other coaches used to be like, never do more than 10 minutes for someone that doesn't pay you. But for some reason, I sort of said, well, I'm not going to know enough about this particular client unless I really give them, first of all, the most powerful conversation they're about to have, so that they can actually in their mind sort of go, my God, this is the free call. I can't wait to actually do a full experience with you if this is the amount of attention and intimacy that I receive. And yes, that is an hour of my time, but the conversion rates of how that customer turns into a paying customer is over 90% of a conversion rate. Now, you cannot say that for a Facebook ad strategy or a Google ad strategy. I mean, those are great lead generation tools, but where the especially for service-based businesses, where they're going to actually put their money where their mouth is, where people are going to pay for that service, is through intimate conversations. I mean, any of us here that are in service-based businesses are working in a human-based business. We are dealing with the asset of a person. So that sales process, that marketing process needs to be humanized. And I always say we can't automate intimacy. As much as AI and all that's here, we know when it's a robot. We know when it's a bot, when there's a messenger bot talking to us. But at the end of the day, if people are hiring you as the expert, you as the advice, person, you have to show up in the process of marketing. There's nothing to automate there. Jen's like, that's how Lydia hooked me. It's true. We talked for probably an hour and a half.
Well, I think in to borrow a writing term, we always say, show, don't tell. So don't tell someone that you're a great coach or a great editor. Don't tell someone that you have best-selling clients. Don't tell them that you're going to help them with their book. Show them. And the fastest way to show someone is to sit down, connect with them, and give them value. And if you love what you're doing, then it's good. Working for an hour in order to earn thousands of dollars down the line is no problem. If you feel like you're kind of compromised, and then maybe you're not in the right role and you need to keep looking for something that suits you or feels more natural to you.
Or part of it is eating the humble pie, right? Starting again and not letting your ego of 20 years experience in the industry get in your way of actually doing something new, right? I think that's a big one as well. All right, well, on that note, let's answer some important questions that people have put on the Ask a Question tab. Now, we're going to be ending this webinar soon after the Q&A, so if there's any other burning questions for Cate right now, here is your time to go into the Ask a Question tab underneath this video to submit yours. Okay, the first question comes from Thuy. I hope I'm saying this right. I always say it wrong, I'm sure, different names, so please correct me, Thuy, if you are here. So Thuy question is, how do you sustain yourself financially when pursuing a new creative endeavor? I would like to be a travel filmmaker and cultural storyteller. What would your advice be about that, Cate?
I would probably go, I mean, it's great to give yourself a little space by having some savings and, kind of living off them. But at the same time, I think it's also good to have an income stream right from the beginning, even if it's not as high as you want it to be. So as you know, I was earning $150 a week at the beginning, which was okay for me because I was living in Bali and I could buy dinner for $1 a day. In an ideal scenario, I probably would have actually started this journey back when I still had a job, and I could have established a lot of what I did as a side hustle on the weekends. But let's say, in my case, that it didn't pan out that way. It was a cold turkey kind of transition. And so for me, just earning, $5 here and $10 there as part of what as a way to kind of support myself in the beginning was better than nothing. I think that at the start, sometimes you do have to compromise a little bit on what you offer while you get your skills and your confidence up. So I was editing nonfiction back then. I was editing website copy. I was editing everything just to get money through the door and to continue refining my skills. I don't do that now, but if I had to start all over again, I would just to get that clients and experience through the door.
I think that's such a good point to make, because I think a lot of the times when we first get started, we are sort of going, oh, I shouldn't work with this person because it's not exactly the perfect client. But you're right. There's so much benefit in sort of going, hey, it's not the perfect ideal client, but I get to feel a bit more confident about taking some money to do a bit of work. That practice of just charging is super important. And then the second thing is there's always something to learn from a client, right? That is not always perfectly the profile of the right person or the right type of project, but the practice of the skill set, I think, is absolutely beneficial, right? To continue to do it. And you're so right that I think the safest way to do it is when you are still working full time. If you can manage that, is to be able to carve out the time during, a time where you feel safe financially. When you are getting a paycheck, you are going to take bigger risks in a way when you feel financially safe. And then being able to save up money in conjunction with that plan of launching a side hustle, so that when the time comes for you to back your main side hustle project as your, biggest earning potential project, you still have some savings to rely on just in case, right? This is sort of what I did as well for 9 months before I decided to quit. Is I launched a side hustle while I was working full time. I worked a weekend job at the bar that I used to work in university just to get some extra income in, and had about 6 months worth of living cost of savings, because that felt like the safety net for me to be able to take that leap. Some people it's 3 months, some people it's a year, depending on whether or not you have family or, debt or whateher it is. But you need to find that, comfort zone, break even point financially to make sure that you have that savings as well in the belt. So Vivi, hope that was helpful for you.
One thing I would just really quickly add to that is in this specific case study or example, I would be looking at how, so obviously travel is a priority for you. So I would be looking at how your skills can minimize the cost of your travel. I mean, I know so many people who own hotels and properties who allow people to stay for free if they produce little videos for them, for their Instagram and stuff like that. So I would be looking at like, how can I take my passion and my skill set and use it to help finance this journey that I want to go on, or at least reduce the cost so that I can hold on to as many of my savings as possible. And sure, you want to tell cultural stories. That's not the same as, doing a story about a hotel, but you're still refining your skills. You're still creating contacts, and you're proving to yourself that you can do this. And the more you can do something, the more you can specialize in it. And the more you specialize in it, the more you can start focusing on the stories that you really want to tell. But in this initial stage, look at how you can kind of use those skills to, finance or facilitate the lifestyle that you want.
Love that. Thank you for that. Okay, Yolanda asks, how long was the test period before you felt comfortable launching your business?
I'm still testing constantly.
5 years down, 6 years down the road even.
I don't feel that there was, if I was to, I love the idea of a beta lab. I think that if I was to really try to create a demarcation line between when I was really experimental versus when I felt that I was really a full-time professional. To be honest, I think it probably was about 6 months. I think that's the amount of time that it took for me to really get an idea of what my point of difference was and who my ideal client was, and why I could, start charging serious money, because I was worth it. What I was offering was worth it. I think that took about 6 months.
Yeah, perfect. And that was sort of full-time work as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And again, could be different for different industries for sure. And also how new you are to that industry. So for some people, it's a brand new thing. They've literally never done it before. Just like with you were just sort of reading in bed, right? That was your own experience of some reading and access to that industry, but you've never been paid to do before. And where some people, if you come from an industry, so for example, Lee that's here, she's doing a business that is very related to her experience. It's just a very different offering, or that she's never been her own boss around it, but actually the credentials and the experience of, 15, 20 years in the business or in the industry is not completely foreign to her. So for that sort of circumstance, sometimes you could actually launch a little bit faster, because you may only need about maybe 3 test clients in order to actually really understand. So it really depends on how familiar you are with the craft, how much more that you really need to learn.
What kind of credibility you have. Like if I could have put on my website on day one that I had, 20 best-selling clients, and I'm sure that journey would have been faster for me. Sure. One thing I would say though is that it's really interesting how you bring your past into your present, in that my background was in marketing and film. But one of the wonderful things about that is that so many editors these days, and from the traditional editing world, are kind of let's find your voice and let's explore, your journey and blah, 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 blah. And it's very kind of holistic, and that's fantastic. My own editor is like that, and I love working with her, and I think it's great. But what I did bring to the picture was I am here to help you sell a product. Like, let's look at how this story is actually going to connect with readers and sell. I always came from it from a very commercial perspective, which in genre fiction is a really good thing, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to hook readers into series and things like that. So I guess that in a way, like, as much as but one of my jobs in the film industry had been to assess manuscripts. So like to take a manuscript or a screenplay, and say, whether it was something we were interested in investing in, or whether it was something that would go on the slush pile. So I never had like direct literary experience, but I did have experiences that were more based almost on like values and ideas and greater concepts that were extremely relevant to what I was doing. I just need to, so, at the beginning, I would have felt like a total imposter, and I would have gone, oh, if only I'd spent the last 10 years, working at Penguin. Now I'm really grateful for my background, because I actually think it really helps my clients in a lot of ways. So it all works out in the end, is the end message. Like, if you're meant to be doing something, it will work out.
And I think that's, what I was talking about before, that ability to look at your experience and sort of go, how can I bring some of what I had before into this new offering? Because there's always something that you can bring to the table, and not to look at everything so literally connected to only that industry you've ever worked with. Like, really break down from your old job what it is that you did. You could say I'm a marketing specialist, but what does that really mean?
What it means is I communicated with people for a living. I manipulated them for a living. Well, guess what? That works really well in books too.
Totally. Yeah, I love that you went there, because I think that's what a lot of people have to learn to do, is that you have a lot to bring to the table, and you don't have to regret the history of your resume. You don't have to regret that you've been in a different industry, because actually that may be your difference. That could be your unique advantage, that you are not like any other traditional editor that has gone through the same schooling, the same education, the same alumni. You're coming from a corporate background with a marketing and ad history that can really make the commercial part of a book absolutely even more effective for these authors, which is
all of these industries are being disrupted at the moment. Like, so many creative industries online are going through massive transformations, and they do require new thinking. So things like self-publishing and connecting with readers, it requires new thinking, and a lot of the older traditional editors are struggling to kind of keep up with that. So I think it's a great time to be launching a career, because there, in this explosion of new opportunities, you will find a space for yourself.
Absolutely, especially in old school industries like publishing, where things are very dinosaur-like, and you come in with a fresh perspective and a point of view that is a lot more in sync with what's going on today in the modern world. I mean, right away, you can punch above your weight in that sense as well. All right, let's answer Leanne's question. I think it's a good one. Leanne says, hi, Cate, in terms of some of the logistics of how you deliver your service, because obviously you're very location independent, doing it from the tropics of Bali, servicing all sorts of global clients. How do you connect with your clients? Do you do video meetings or just communicate via email? I feel like someone's writing is very intimate. It's a very intimate thing to be involved with. So I imagine that having a personal connection would help foster the relationship more. Do you find that to be the case in your line of work?
It's a really good question. And it's very true. Having a personal relationship is really important. I think that the funny thing with that, though, is that, when I've been, editors aren't able to connect with their clients as much as they would like. We have a huge number of projects that we're managing at any one time in general. And I think there's a very different experience between, say, being a published author, where you kind of, you have an editor with, like, to use Penguin as an example, it seems to be the name that we're going with. When they acquire your book, they give you your editor, and the editor in many ways has like the final creative say in how that book goes to market, because ultimately they've bought the rights to your book, and they will decide how they think it needs to change to be sold. So you will kind of have a very personal relationship with your editor, because you're going back and forth with them, trying to convince them to do what you want, or, agreeing to what they say, or fighting for what you believe in and compromising on some things. Having said that, it would be very unusual to meet up with your editor in person all the time. Like in general, it would be like a phone call or an email. In my situation, the writer has the power. They've come to me for a service, and I give them my advice and I give them my creative ideas and my input. But ultimately, the writer is their own publisher, unless they have a publishing deal. That's a different thing. And so they kind of like dictate what what form the book takes in the end, and that's totally fine with me. I'm not here to bully anyone into anything. But what that means is that I can facilitate that relationship via mainly email, Skype, and voice recording. And when I'm in the US 3 months every year, I do meet up with a lot of my clients in person when I'm there. But honestly, I found that working from overseas has not been a problem for me at all. In fact, it probably creates a little bit more definition and boundaries around my time, which I actually really appreciate. So yeah, we managed to maintain I mean, I'm telling you, like editing someone's memoir, for example, where they're talking about their divorce or talking about surviving cancer or going to war and having their best friend shot beside them. You know, you do go into some really heavy areas with people, and you do form really close friendships. I go and stay with one of my clients in his lake house with my partner. Wow. Every year. You know, we're really close. And we're just so fortunate to live in a time where there is the technology to facilitate those relationships, because I do think it would have been impossible to do what I do now 10 years ago, put it that way.
I mean, absolutely. Even for me, you know, I mean, all these people here that are listening here are from literally 3 continents around the world. I mean, this would have never been possible even 10 years ago. I mean, webinars are still very new, how we teach online, how we facilitate community online even, and utilize, you know, what's available to us to connect these days. I think relationships are still very important in service-based industries, but how we foster those relationships and how we nurture those relationships can be quite creative these days. You know, you don't literally have to be in the same room to do so. And you can absolutely be using lots of really affordable tools. You have to learn them, of course, like any other, you know, parts of business, but it is absolutely very possible to choose a lifestyle, for example, a place like Bali being low cost in living, which is sort of what brought us here in the first place, so we could invest more into our own businesses. All that is so much more possible these days. But absolutely a great question, Leanne. And all the tools, I think, are absolutely available for you that can be learned affordably as well. Leanne says, thank you for your in-depth answer, Cate. The last question is going to be from Michael, which is more of a practical question about being a digital nomad. So Michael asks, how do you handle health insurance? I have a family, so not having health insurance concerns me, but maybe it makes sense not to bother with it. What would be your advice around that?
Well, I think that's one of the really interesting things about becoming independent. Suddenly you have to look after these aspects for yourself, and not only health insurance, but making sure that you're putting money aside for your future and retirement and, you know, elements like that, especially if you have a family. I just have a health insurance policy that I buy. It's, you know, I think it's about $600 a year. It includes everything. If I was hurt by a coconut falling out of the sky, it includes being medevaced in a helicopter to Singapore. It includes maternity stuff if I decide I want to have a baby. So you can actually buy all of these services for yourself. You don't have to rely on a government to give them to you. But yeah, there's a little bit more, you know, research and work involved that goes into, like, you know, where am I resident? How do I pay tax? Where do I, you know, how do I look after health insurance? What am I investing in to make sure that I have, you know, money when I want to retire? All of that kind of stuff you suddenly become responsible for. But if you're happy to put a little bit of research in, I think you can actually do a much better deal for yourself than, you know, the government will give you in some instances.
Totally.
It doesn't have to be a negative thing at all.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we are wanting to have autonomy over our work lives and how we live our lives, we also need to have autonomy, you know, and be responsible, right, over the answers. That we cannot rely on just whatever was happening back in the day of what is normal, of what's traditional, to sort of be saving up money or be responsible for our health. I'm in the same boat. I mean, that was one of my concerns in the beginning of time, leaving Canada, having really good health insurance, instead of going, shit, you know, if I leave Canada for more than 6 months at a time, I'm no longer covered by MSP, right? Which is the medical service plan there. That's scary because I don't know what that looks like beyond what I knew, right? Which is the $60 a month fee I was paying there. But then through research, and there's so many great travel blogs and expat blogs that are out there, or just even simply just asking people that are currently expats or digital nomads about their own health insurance. You know, all you have to do is ask. You're going to get to those answers quite quickly. And then for me, you know, being in Southeast Asia, we have access actually to some of the best medical professionals actually in places like Bangkok and Singapore, where if there is something that you need to get done, that's sort of like a, you know, my yearly checkups and things like that, I would go and do that in conjunction with a visa run. You know, but most of the time, you know, in terms of just like a flu or, you know, needing some antibiotics for this and that, there's clinics and things like that obviously are available, even in third world countries like Indonesia. But being really responsible with your own research first and knowing what your family needs, any sort of medical, you know, things that are important to realize, to know even what country can support, you know, the emergencies that can happen for your child, I think is the responsible thing to do.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. All right. Well, that is it for our interview with Cate Hogan. Now, Cate, thank you so very much for spending the time with us and giving us all your insider stories about this. It's always so nice to hear not just the successful, where are you now, but actually where it all began. And I'm so happy that you told us a lot about some of the unsexy things that are actually most effective to do. But, you know, eating that humble pie is sort of really doing the real work rather than actually having this fantasy of that this official launch of your business is going to be, you know, flashlights and, you know, like all this like things you think you see in other people's businesses, but aren't revealed a lot in how people get started. So thank you so very much. And 3V thanks you as well. She says she's really drawn to your story and thank you for sharing. Now, if people want to learn more about what you do, read your blogs, maybe they're an aspiring editor or writer as well themselves, where can they find you right now in the World Wide Web?
Well, a Google search for my name, Cate Hogan, with a C, will bring up lots of stuff, or you could just visit my website, catehogan.com. Yeah, there you go. Tina just put the link up, so you don't even have to Google it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so very much for everybody for joining us. I hope that was inspiring for you to hear and also give you a bit of a planting of the seed about what you need to do to move forward and not to keep waiting for the perfect time to put your gifts out there. You know, there is no perfect time. You have to be the creator of your own perfect time. And usually the perfect time is now with whatever it is that you're capable to do. And as Cate said, the biggest asset you're going to have behind your work is your deep interest and your passion to do the thing that you want to do versus thinking about it in you know, the reward sense of money and profit to start with. That can really trump people's confidence level and feel like an imposter, you know, when we do these things. But when you do it for the pure love of it or for the pure love of learning about yourself and about the craft, I think you'll be in a great position to then start earning money because you are exchanging value. And that's what money is. It's purely an exchange of value. Back in the day, it would be exchanging sheep and chickens. And now it's this paper thing we call money or PayPal.
Or Bitcoin.
Or Bitcoin, exactly, in the new world. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Cate, for joining us. If you've been inspired by this webinar, as I said, go up to the top right-hand corner, press the invite button, share that with your crew and your tribe so that people can hear more about Cate's story and also be inspired to take their leap into the unconventional and into a better version of their life and career. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. Have a good night, morning, wherever you are. Bye.
Bye.